Hi, YouTube. How are you?
You're up before me. Still can't even.
It says meeting now, streaming live on YouTube. How
There
you
we go.
doing, YouTube?
Hello, YouTube. All right. Tweet out the link. We good. Get the podcast itself started. Hey there, and welcome to the Hawk Fanatic Hawkeye Hotspot Podcast. It is Thursday, October the 17th, about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. I have a light jacket on today, Scott. We got to the discussion yesterday of it's probably a pretty common discussion in Iowa. When do we put the heat on?
Yeah.
Because it goes from like last week, it's like 90 and we have the air conditioning on. And then what was it? Monday night got down to like 25,
Yeah.
28,
Yeah.
something like that.
Mhm.
I'm old school guy. Throw a jacket on, bundle up. It was like 65 in here yesterday, and I told people to put coats on.
It's the eternal Iowa Midwest weather syndrome, which in April everybody's the same way, where it's like, I know that it's 81 outside, but I'm not turning on the air. And
Nope, they'll
then
sit there on the couch, sweat pouring off your
yeah,
face. Nope, not doing it.
no, and then you get into October, and then you have the frost at night, and into the 20s, and it's like, I'm not turning it on. Well, because I'm a softy now in my old age, I see my cat shivering, and I'm like, first of all, my cat is the softest cat. I mean, not Sparkle, God rest his soul, but Zilla. And I'm like, we've got neighborhood feral cats, who would tear him apart, but he is 16, and I see him just like, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
I'm a sorry ass man.
I'll definitely. If this keeps up, and I know I'll have a discussion again today, and eventually I break down. I don't have the stamina to hold up as long as I used to, and really,
Yeah.
it's probably like a couple bucks a day, but it's the principle of the thing. So.
I know it's our old dude stubbornness that gets us in play. But I'm sure you're not a big fan of Toby Keith, but the song "I Ain't as Good as I Once Was," and it talks about all these different things that whether it's hitting on women or getting in fights, that you know your body says you can't do this, boy, but your pride says, oh yes you can. That's
I feel that
yes, that's
every day.
me. Yeah, every single day.
Yeah. And we're old enough to remember when Iowa and Michigan State used to play more regularly.
Yeah.
And that'll segue us into Hawk Talk. We'll talk about the Michigan State game this weekend, 6:30 Central Time, Saturday night, NBC, Peacock stream, which I know everybody loves. But we'll get into that in a minute. We'll look back at last week's, I thought, one of the more impressive Iowa games in quite some time, just in terms of a complete complementary football effort for all three phases. And Scott, let's start with you. Bigger picture, Big Ten. You get to see Purdue and Oregon tomorrow night in West Lafayette. Stay over in the great state of Indiana.
Offersville, baby.
And then Bloomington Saturday for a big one with your friends from Nebraska. Hopefully you get to tailgate with some of those folks. I'm sure they'll have you there. But cool. You liking this? You liking getting to see a little bit more than just Iowa? I know you're always got an eye on Iowa, but it's cool for this podcast too, because it gives us a perspective of like when you went to Minnesota, we had that. So this is kind of nice to see. And obviously, Saturday's a more important game, but Oregon at West Lafayette is kind of funny too.
Yeah. You got the number 2 team in the country going to probably the worst team in the Big Ten, so that will, if anything beyond a 35-point outcome, then you're kind of wondering.
I eagerly await our picks and whatever the hell that point spread is, which is probably insane.
Let's see. Right now, well, at least what I wrote down was 27.5. So
Yeah.
it's still, they got to travel. They have they travel 3 time zones. It kind of gets screwy. But when it comes to this, it's challenging, and it's in a good way. And it's also, sometimes, it's kind of awkward for me because I've been, so embedded with covering Iowa sports for so long that and I still do this podcast. I do other podcasts. I do, TV shows on Monday nights. I radio hits and stuff. So I'm never going to just like throw it away, especially football. But I do have to train myself to what's my job and do my job. And that meant Tuesday was like the first time that I can remember that I missed all of the availability, for Iowa, because as much as I wanted to go, and I got up and I started writing some stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'd really, if I get this done, then I could go over there. But then I had to set myself down and say, I've got other stories about other things going on. Today I wrote about Red Grange and his 100th anniversary of his 6-touchdown game.
Cool.
That for Illinois, I've got to get this done. That's kind of like, it's strange to say, but that's not in my purview. So I had to kind of take that, which, I'll look over the transcripts and watch the videos and stuff just to still keep a lay of the land. But the fact is that I get to see 4 different teams this weekend, and only one of them would I see with Iowa, and that'd be the last game of the year. I think that's pretty interesting. It gives me a better perspective on things, because the Big Ten wide is what I really need to focus on, and that's really. And those are issues beyond even sport. It's, the money, it's all the logistics and what have you. So, but, that said, this weekend, you've got the number 2 team in the country playing at the worst team in the country, or Big Ten. And then you've got 2 teams that are really, they're vying for a chance the playoff. You got undefeated Indiana. Who would have thought that? Nebraska on the cusp of getting its first bowl game in 8 years. I mean, so there's some pretty high times, and I'm kind of glad to be able to see that. And no offense to Iowa, Michigan State, because I will definitely DVR it and watch it as closely as I can. But I think it's not on the same level as those other 2, or at least Nebraska, Indiana.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I mean, it's not that long ago where this was, a really real game people looked forward to, and it just doesn't have the same juice with not having D'Antonio anymore. And this is the first trip to East Lansing since 2017. It's just I started working. I do like a opponent intel where I kind of, it's different from, I've changed kind of how I've done my previews this year, and I kind of dig into the opposing teams, and just, we're going to start to see this, unfortunately. I think we'll maybe see some rivalries created, potentially, like you see with Iowa and Nebraska. But stuff like Iowa and Michigan State that was so strong a decade ago is just kind of falling away. And that's what happens when you have 18 teams.
For sure. And that's that's why I kind of like the West Division. I know it competitively, it just didn't add up. Yeah. It made no sense and it's understandable. As much as Penn State complained and everything, it's true. I mean, if you're the 3rd best team in the league and you're the 2nd best team in the league, but you're in one division, and then Iowa at best was the 4th best team in the league last year, and you knew what was going to happen in the championship game before it ever happened. You just, you need to kind of break that up. And so that's understandable to the big picture. I would say with, these rivalries, I like the West Division because, selfishly they were close, but Illinois, Iowa, that's a natural. Northwestern Iowa, it's a natural. Michigan State back in the old Legends era, and then even before before Nebraska joined, which they played 6 times over 8 years. Those games were rock'em sock'em robots. They were really impactful. I mean, you think about D'Antonio's first couple of years. There was double overtime in Iowa City in 07, 16-13 Michigan State in East Lansing, 15-13 Iowa in East Lansing. And then Big Ten championship, you had Kirk win 100 at East Lansing in 12, which was 19-16 in overtime. I mean, all these fist fights between these programs, and it was just...
You had the hey diddle diddle with Mike
Sadler up the middle.
Kevin got 6. I mean, there's just so many great memories from that stretch of time, and now, I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess we're the old guys just complaining about change, but there is some sadness to it. There is some just you lose something.
Yeah. Jarrell Worthy laying on the field, which has started the whole injury booing, which I really don't like, but that's not going to happen, Yeah. I mean, all these games, all these series that you grew up watching, whether they were great, like Michigan State, Iowa. I mean, Morehouse, we used to say that Iowa, Michigan State, and Wisconsin were three polar bears fighting over the same sheet of ice. And it's really true. I mean, back in the D'Antonio days, and you know this as well as anybody, and same thing with Wisconsin, they fought like hell in the Chicago suburbs for guys. They had the same tenets, the same principles, and they fought recruits, everywhere. DeMatha in Washington, we know some of those stories.
Went hard after running backs. They all wanted running backs because they were like the three schools that still ran the ball so much, and all the guys that they battled over.
Yeah, and you look at all three of them understand their place in the world. They don't have the revenue and the resources and the tradition that Ohio State and Michigan have. But they all know that they could build that type of a program and succeed and take themselves to a championship level team. And then all three did. And it's particularly Michigan State, Iowa, just some of those slugfests. I mean, if you were out on the field or you heard the hits between these programs, it was, I like caveman football. I don't mind 16-13 if it's well played 16-13. I would say in 8, 9, and certainly 15 in Indianapolis were well played, low scoring defensive struggles. In 12, it wasn't the case. That was kind of like this game will never get over with. And it was in the rain, and it was double overtime, and it was field goals. But I don't know. I'm sorry that it's gone, but sometimes that it's just the way it goes. And you're not going to play Ohio State and Michigan with regularity. Illinois, to me, Illinois and Northwestern are even worse just because they've been in the same division and they're closer, and you really get they're your neighbors, and you're not going to play them with regularity.
Yeah, the Illinois one's the one that really just that's the example of maybe what some of those longer Big Ten series will be like for Iowa, just because Illinois, when I got here in the late 90s, it was still pretty heated between Illinois and Iowa, and it's just kind of slowly faded away through the last couple decades. And but I'll be embracing the 12-team playoff, and there are some changes that I really enjoy. It's just when we get to weeks like this and I'm writing my previews and stuff, you start to go down memory lane, and you're thinking about, the times we talked about, all those memories we talked about, and you're thinking to yourself, well, shit, they haven't been to East Lansing in 7 years, and I'm like, Jesus, that's wild. The guys that are freshmen on Iowa's team were like freaking 10, 11 years old last. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of goofy, but we'll get into Michigan State more. Let's look back, Scott, at the Washington game. We're clear, 5 days clear of it, so we don't want to waste too much time on it or spend too much time on it. But as I said earlier, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. It was good to see this. That was like enjoyable football. You see all three phases. Everybody's contributing. It just was a really good performance by Iowa against a respectable Big Ten opponent, a team that just had beaten the defending national champions. Now, granted, it's not the same Michigan team, but that's still a good win. And Iowa turned around the next week and put a 40 spot on.
That was as complete as I agree with you that was as complete of a performance against a good team as we've seen in a really long time for Iowa, because all three phases worked. Played at a very, very high level. On offense, the running game was outstanding again, as always. The passing game was efficient. It didn't do anything to lose the game. But, again, if you're Iowa and you can run the ball at will, you run the ball at will. Don't mess around with, now there's going to be games coming up. It could be this week. It could be Wisconsin week. It certainly will probably be Nebraska week, where you're going to need more out of the passing game. But in this situation, they were able to do exactly what they wanted to. And then defensively, I've heard a couple of people complain about the early part of the game. And I'm like, do you guys really watch anything besides Iowa? I mean, other teams score like 28, 30 points a game.
Yeah.
I mean, it just happens. And it wasn't until garbage time that they got their second touchdown, So Iowa, blocks a field goal. What would that made the score? 40-19. They intercept a pass. Jermari Harris did a great job there. Again, really good play, but and special teams was probably its best game in a long time.
The bar is set so high for Iowa's defense. I think it's unfair sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
And like you said, Washington's got some really good receivers, man. A good running back, and Iowa, good friggin' quarterback is a Mississippi State's all-time leader in pretty much every passing category, and they pretty neutralized him for the most part. I mean, that early part of the game where they're scripting plays and they get into a rhythm, sometimes they're going to move the ball on you, but you adjust. And Iowa, to me, from my perspective, I was encouraged by the defense, Scott, because earlier in the season, I'm not sure it always did a good job of adjusting to what it saw early in the game. Mm-hmm. Saturday, it did. It adjusted to what it was seeing and then shut it down. And that's the Iowa defense that you want.
Yeah, for sure. We saw it, in years past, up until the last couple of years where they've just been as dominant as ever. We've always seen that, Norm Parker and with Phil, that teams that script against them usually move the ball on the first drive. They just knew which buttons to push. And then it was kind of like a batter's going through the line, seeing the pitcher the second time through, then they kind of see what's going on and they adjust, and the other team runs out of plays, and then they're working through things. And then Iowa, it might look like, oh, shoot, they just gave up a touchdown on the first drive of the game. And then all of a sudden at halftime, the other team has 10 points, and you're like, oh, you're all right. That's kind of what happened here. And Will Rogers, as you said, I mean, not only leads like Mississippi State all time and all these, he's among the best in SEC history,
he got like 12,000 yards or something.
Yeah.
Wasn't he?
He just crashed 13,000. Yeah. In his career, and their receivers are good. And somebody was
even the touchdown. I took a still of that. That was a great throw and a great catch. That wasn't bad defense.
No. And people are like, get him out of there. I'm like, sometimes players make plays, man. You just gotta, it's not, you can't expect perfection out there. But overall, they played about as well as they could. And of course, Caleb Johnson, who I don't know that we're talking enough about, right now is my silver football winner in the Big Ten. We just did our midseason All-American team. He's first team All-American running back. He's second to Ashton Jeanty, and he could be. There's an outside shot. He could be in New York. Certainly he'll be in the. If he continues at this pace, he'll certainly be one of 3 finalists for the Doak Walker, and he'll be. In April he'll be getting a nice check from probably outside the Swarm, not Swarm. They'll be the NFL. But this was a great performance. This was the type of performance you can build on that I think demonstrates to me that Iowa is still a very good team and capable of winning the rest of their games and putting itself back into playoff contention. I did do a heavy examination of all the playoff caliber teams, all the 1-loss and 2-loss teams. I would put them as one of two-loss teams that still have a shot right now. Iowa and Ole Miss. The rest of them are, like Michigan schedules, like they play teams that are 29-7 the rest of the way. Wisconsin even plays Oregon and Penn State and Iowa and Nebraska. So it's kind of like, that's a lot to say that they're going to roll through those. So, but Iowa, the schedule lines up for them. Their opponents are weak on the road and their rivals are at home. So everything works out. So, but overall, this was a performance that they needed and is one that they had.
Yeah, no doubt. And that reminded me we do our the stakes this week, and we'll do that as well going into Michigan State. The stakes are pretty much the same now every week. Iowa needs to win to get to the playoff and get some help as well. As Scott said, Ole Miss, if you're up against a team like that, what's the committee looking at and comparing? And you get a benefit for Iowa by having a manageable schedule down the stretch here, but it also can be a detraction when you're not playing opponents that will impress the committee at the end. So there's so many variables right now, and we're only halfway through the season, but that kind of is where things sit right now. And if you're Iowa, all you can do, it's cliche, but take it 1 week at a time and win just each week and not concern yourself what's going on around you, because you have no control over that. And it is our first year going through this. So there's a lot of us that don't know how they're going to separate 2-loss teams. Maybe a 3-loss team has a schedule so strong that it pushes it over. So it's going to be interesting to see. But for our purposes here in little old Iowa, we're focused. And read Scott's article. I read it as well the other day. And also Jay Higgins was a first team season All-American for the Athletic as well. But check out that article. It gives you a great rundown of what the playoff picture looks like midway through the season. And it'll get, I think, November 5th, right? That's the first playoff ranking.
Yeah, I don't know that a lot of people will watch it.
That's all I'm watching that day.
The playoff ranking.
I don't want to hear anything else that's going on in the world that day.
Yeah. And the championships played on Inauguration Day, by the way.
Yeah. 6 playoff rankings starting November 5th. And it'll be interesting to see, because Iowa's got chance to get up in there now. And if you can get in that first 25, then you kind of see a clearer picture of your path. So
yeah,
that'll be interesting. That'll be what, 2 weeks from Tuesday? Is that right? Yeah. 2 weeks from this Tuesday, we'll get our playoff rankings, because I see people wringing their hands over Michigan being in the top 25 and Iowa not being in the top 25. Don't worry about the AP rankings. I said this to somebody the other day that was arguing with me about this. And I was like, listen, so the people that vote in the AP poll, a lot of them are beat writers who are really busy and only get to watch a certain amount of football. The coaches poll, there's the old joke that the SID or the office assistant votes in that one. Just worry about the one November 5th, because that's the one that's going to determine where Iowa sits going into that last 6 weeks.
No question. It, as we know, and I've helped. I remember when Halas was the voter for a couple of years, and we would obviously on the road trips. It was me and Mark and Mike when I was working at the Gazette, and we would be leaving. It doesn't matter if it was night game or 7 o'clock after we leave in a stadium, and he'd start going through, and we would talk out where everybody should be, and it's a matrix, and it's like, well, you're looking at the scores, you're looking at stats, you're not really watching or evaluating the opponents. You just can't, and that's why it's challenging. And so a team could be like, let's say Iowa Troy, just playing like crap at halftime, and then what was it, 14-10? Is that the right?
Yeah,
score?
Roughly. I think it was.
Yeah, or even Minnesota Iowa, they're down. 14-7 at half up there, and then all of a sudden, the second half they score 24 points, and and then they win what 31.
Even the third quarter at Ohio State.
Yeah, and so you look at the Iowa-Ohio State game, and you look, if you're just stopping after the first half, you're thinking, yeah, Iowa's a pretty good team, they're a top 20 team, and then you see 35-7, and it's like, they're nobody, and then same thing with Iowa versus Minnesota. Well, it's 31-14. You don't have a chance to rewatch every single game. Well, that's what this committee's job is to do.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for Iowa. As you said, you start to look at games and how they may help you. I'll say this, the last week's Oregon-Ohio State game hurt Iowa like you would not believe. Yeah. Because now they can't get past Ohio State. And you really expect Ohio State to lose again, in the Big Ten championship. And then, so what you look at is you're plugging your nose and you're rooting for your rivals. You hope Iowa State continues to win because that loss looks good. And then you hope that, like, the Badgers play host to Penn State next week after this week. And you're like, okay, I want the Badgers to win for a couple of reasons. One, it puts Penn State into that category of lose, and then they play Ohio State. And two, then it gives some juice to that Iowa-Wisconsin game because, oh, okay, they've got a quality win. They're kind of starting to roll here because if they beat Northwestern and Penn State, they've won 4 straight. They're coming to Iowa City. Maybe both teams are ranked. So then you got a shot there. So, but that's the way it's going to be. But that's what makes it exciting, right? Otherwise we'd be talking about, well, can Iowa get into New Year's Six or they're going to go to the Citrus Bowl again?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's, when you look at it from, the who you have to root for angle, to me, that's the most interesting. That it was Ohio State last week, but it's definitely Iowa State. That's the one that and I just think for an Iowa fan, I mean, in your soul, I don't know how you could sit there and watch an Iowa State game and root for them to win. I think you just hold your nose and look at the final score and say, all right, they won. Let's move on. Because it's just not it's not good for your soul, I don't think, as an Iowa fan to root for the Cyclones and vice versa.
I had an old manager, this is when I was in college, who, he'd always say life is a shit sandwich, eat it or starve. And that's kind of what you got to take a bite out of, here when you're rooting for your rivals, you're like, oh, I got to root for them. This week, you got to root for Nebraska against Indiana for your own self-interest.
Yep.
And I've seen it before in the past. And this is what's funny because this separates to me rivalries and who you hate versus who you respect.
Mm-hmm.
And when Nebraska plays Wisconsin, even if beating Wisconsin all these years would have been better for your self-interest, most Iowa fans I noticed rooted still against Nebraska. They just don't like Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
So this week, even though Indiana may be a great story nationally and in the Big Ten, I mean, your self-interest is Nebraska winning because it kind of knocks Indiana down. It keeps Nebraska probably gets back in the rankings. They'll lose to Ohio State, but you get to the end of the year, you want to get into a position where you're playing meaningful games. And if Nebraska's ranked and Iowa's ranked, and you get to that Black Friday game and say both teams they're both 9-2, then winner gets a shot, loser does not. And that's really important. Of course, we've thought that series was going to produce that since 2011 in the West Division and the Legends Division, and here we are still waiting for a winner-take-all type of important game.
Definitely interesting games, definitely interesting storylines, but not very impactful when it came to the ramifications of the game, because most of the time the best Nebraska was playing for was a damn bowl game recently. Yeah. So that's kind of without it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned this before we started recording or after, but the return of Seth Anderson last week, Scott, I think is significant. And, you lose Caleb Brown, who didn't really factor in this season anyway, up to the point where he decided to go in the portal. Now you add a receiver who has experience that you hope can take the next step. Also, when you lose, one of your two top tight ends. So, as you said, I was going to need to lean on the passing game at some point. Maybe it's this week or not. And the return of Seth Anderson is certainly a benefit to that.
I was really impressed with him, just maybe because I haven't seen him out there for a while, but I like the way he ran routes. He got open. He's got speed. He's got quickness. He's going to make plays, and it's a really good element. I mean, and I know there's a lot of disappointment around Caleb Brown, and understandably so. I mean, but I think it's more the idea of Caleb Brown than the actual performance of Caleb Brown. I mean, okay, he was a 4-star recruit from Chicago who went to Ohio State, and now he's coming to Iowa. The idea of Caleb Brown is, wow, Iowa finally got somebody like that. The actual performance did not match that. And it's unfortunate that it didn't. He's out. But I'll say this, that what if his performance was equal to that of Jacob Gill? How would you feel then? What if you just changed the name and Jacob Gill's name instead was Caleb Brown? You'd feel pretty good about that. I mean, I think he's been a terrific addition in a short period of time and done everything you asked him to do. So I think with him, Seth Anderson, and Reese Vanderzee, plus Dayton Howard and Jarrett Bowie, the younger players are getting better. They seem to me, Rob, that they have enough athletic ability. it's going to take some time for the younger ones. I mean, you're talking about, 3 freshmen or, true freshmen or redshirt freshmen. And then, a couple of people who didn't play much previously. Anderson hurt all the time and Gill not until he really got to Iowa. It's going to take growth. It's another year in the making, but I like where the strides they're making, though. They are making plays. They are doing what they need to do. And if they're not doing it in the pass game, they're doing it in the run game. So I think this is I really like what the dimension that Seth Anderson brings, especially with Addison Estrenga out for a couple of weeks. Arm in a sling, because I think it's just it's going to help this offense.
Yeah, we've talked about the receiver position a ton on this podcast and the need to develop because you're not getting, those ready-made guys that go to Alabama and Ohio State. You need to develop a Jarrett Bowie and a Dayton Howard. And we're starting to, that in year 2, they're already contributing, to me, is a really good sign.
It really, I'd be interested in talking to Tyler Barnes about this kind of on the side or whatever, but how does this impact his evaluation of what they need at the end of the season? I mean, let's say that they all stay. There are no departures among those 5 upper ones, not so much below. I think attrition there may be expected, but I think when you look at, if you're able to keep Bowie and Howard and Vanderzee and Gill, I would not expect Gill to leave. There's no reason to. And Anderson, do you then say, you know what? I think we're okay. We don't really need to hit the portal here. Well, I think we're fine. I think that, you kind of want to evaluate that over the next few weeks, but I'm seeing enough from them to think that, yeah, maybe you're okay there. You don't really have to whereas a couple weeks ago, I was still like, yeah, you're going to have to get somebody. And I'm not saying you turn somebody down, but that's capable of starting for you. But I think you want to rely on your development, and you've seen enough out of these guys. And it's like, yeah, let's ride it out with these guys, because if they feel like you're investing in them and they're investing in you and they're growing and you're rewarding them, it's going to be mutually beneficial. And that's what you really want. That's what a program like Iowa has thrived on for a couple of decades.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you want to get into that pattern of developing your guys and then supplementing through the portal. You don't want to have to live in the portal at that position. You want to, like I say, supplement, kind of like, linebacker. You needed a guy. You went and you got Nick Jackson. Boom, that works. But most of the, you still had Jay Higgins, you still had Kyler Fisher. You developed those guys, but you added a guy. That's the kind of thing. I think if you can get into that pattern at wide receiver, it makes the position healthy.
For sure. Yeah. And I think they're in a healthy position. I mean, the one I would wonder a little bit about is tight end, and with losing Luke Lachey. I mean, I think Zach Ortworth and Addison Estrenga will be okay in the future. And then, you want to see what, Hoffman and Leaper can kind of do, and Michael Burt and all those guys. But, I think right now, that's their evaluation. But the positions that you're looking at aren't paramount, and that on that side of the ball, and that's a good thing. Maybe offensive line, but I also think that they're starting to get their stagger that they once had, which is they're going to lose some guys, but they're bringing guys back. I mean, Bo Stevens, who's hurt right now, but he's going to be back, and Jennings Dunker will be back, and then you have Cade Pieper, who's seen a lot of action more as a blocking tight end. He'll be there, and then. Do you feel like you have enough depth? Maybe do you go out and get one, something like that? That's really healthy for Iowa. And then you've got to, I think ultimately the biggest question of all is, what do you do at quarterback? I mean, do you have faith Brendan Sullivan's your guy next year, or Marco Lainez, or, on down the list? Or do you feel like, I don't think we got the guy on campus and we're going to have to go out and get him?
Yeah. And those are, last year, in the portal, it was about retention.
Yeah.
This year, it's going to be more about supplementing and filling in holes where you see them. And those can always change, too. You just never know. And a lot of that can happen through bowl prep when you're looking at some of your younger guys. And, And the bye weeks too, they get a chance to evaluate the younger guys to see kind of where they feel they are in terms of their development paths. But guys develop at different rates. I mean, Jamari Harris was really inconsistent, and he's really, really become a lockdown corner this year where you can rely on him and teams are staying away from him.
Sure. He's that classic. I've been talking about him for a long time, that even when it was like that, does he go to the draft or stay, that he's that guy that if he stays, he's going to get better coaching at Iowa than he will in the NFL. And he's going to get obviously more opportunity, because if he went to the NFL draft, chances are maybe he'd be a 7th rounder, probably an undrafted free agent, which means he's cannon fodder and he only maybe makes a practice team. Whereas you come back to Iowa, you're playing an elite conference. You've got one of the best secondary coaches in the country, regardless of level. You can play every down and get better, because his problem has been, in 21, he played a lot when Riley got hurt and they had Matt Hankins got hurt, and then he got hurt. And then he was out all of 2022 and then came back last year, and he was kind of up and down. He was okay, but now he's got a chance to play himself into maybe 4th round. He's got long arms. He's aggressive, physical, mature. Got a lot of ability. So he's going to be a tough guy to replace. They've done a good job over the years of doing that, and I think the kind of the growing pains on the other side, it will help this program big picture. Maybe not so much this year, but with Lee, with Hall, and Nestor, I think you've got 3 guys that you feel like, another year. And then Jalen Watson has seen some action as a true freshman. So you have all of them, and then you have safety. What is Xavier's got it? Probably will have a choice. My opinion is, based on what I've seen, come back. He played his best game the other day, no question. Absolutely, to me, he played fantastic football for the first time in his career.
I can see him having the jump that Jamari had this year, next year, with that consistency if he comes back and has another year of coaching.
Yeah, same deal. Except I think his ceiling is way higher.
Yeah.
He's a guy that if he came out of the draft based on his film here, it would still be, we project him to be this. If he plays like he did the other day, he'll be in a position to where at the end of the year, he'll be looking really good, but it's like, you come back, you've got a chance to put yourself in that All-American discussion, first-round draft pick discussion. It's 1 year, and by the way, you still get a lot in NIL, so you'll be all right there,
And Pancheros.
And Pancheros. Yeah, I know. You wonder about the burrito wars, Rob, between him and Jay Higgins. Pancheros versus Estella's. It's like
hopefully that it's civil.
Hopefully they're not eating burritos and at the same time and then getting into some little discussion that ends up both of them fighting over the same spot to sit. But
yeah. This is probably a good time to take a break. And we'll come back and talk some Michigan State. Yeah. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited. We'll hear from a few more sponsors now. Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk some Michigan State. Hang tight. You know what I bet is big in Indiana? Square dancing. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch, right here in Iowa, can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hardcore Hawk fans gotta have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 @gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or KNICK3615 @gmail.com. And finally, Black Angel Restaurant in downtown Iowa City, or close to downtown Iowa City. I guess that would still be considered downtown Iowa City. Check them out, Black Angel. Google it, check it out. Perez Brothers Tacos, El Banditos, formerly owned by these restaurateurs, however you say that. But really good food, kind of like a Mexican, Southwest, all kind of mixed together. Good stuff. Scott's eating there. He loves it. You should too.
I got to head there, Rob. You know, this is a perfect month to go to Black Angel, in my opinion. I mean, it's Halloween. You're right by the cemetery there. It's, you know, got its own little, spooky, ghost story type of scenario. It's a great restaurant, and you want to, get there around dusk or a little after dark, and woo, I think that's worth your while.
You can even go there on Halloween. That would be an experience.
Yeah.
I've experienced some games in Spartan Stadium that have been a little greasy. And it'll be interesting this Saturday. It's a Saturday night game, and you don't want to compare opposing stadiums to Kinnick. There aren't a lot that have that Saturday night magic. But most stadiums have some. And it's just a different vibe. Fans are tailgating all day. They're lubed up. They're ready to go. And there's still this is one of those games that for Michigan State, Scott, it's a chance, we've seen this through the years with Kirk Ferentz's teams that come, coaches that come in the Big Ten, they're trying to build. A lot of them in this situation that aren't the Blue Bloods look at Iowa as kind of a measuring stick on how you get to that tier of the Big Ten. And this is a chance for Michigan State to beat one of those teams. And that, for them, and they've played good teams already this year. They've lost to Ohio State and Oregon and Boston College. It's kind of a scary spot for Iowa. It better be ready to go. And it's been clean football, lowest penalties. You got to kind of do that stuff on the road when you want to make sure you don't get upset.
If Iowa plays its game, it wins and wins decisively. If it doesn't, then anything can happen. And when you look, Rob, at the impactful numbers in this game, Iowa's number one in the country in fewest penalties per game. They're 90th. That's not good for Michigan State at all, because that's undisciplined. That's just not playing with good chemistry. They are in turnover margin. Iowa's 15th. Iowa always, other than that third quarter against Ohio State, it's been pretty good for the most part. Mm-hmm. Michigan State's 118th. So, and then in red zone, this is another one, red zone offense, they're 126th in the country. So what that spells to me, if Iowa plays the way Iowa is capable, let's say on defense, that potentially they move the ball between the 20s, they get into the red zone, they have a penalty, they turn it over, they find a way to beat themselves. That's kind of the hallmark right now of Michigan State. Now, they have an electrifying quarterback in Aiden Childs that will make a play that everybody will go, wow, that's Antoine Randall L. And then he'll make a play going, all right, I'm glad he's not on our team. Yeah. And he's got that. He's young. He's exciting. He's inconsistent. That's kind of their hallmark. I mean, and the worst part for them is, and a lot of this is a product of who they've played, is they're 102nd in the country in rushing offense. So they can't help him out running the football. And they're running against a team that's really good against the run. So they're going to get in 3rd and longs against Iowa. And he's capable of making one big play, but he's also very capable of making a mistake. He has 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. So that's why I get back to this. Iowa, play your game. It may be like Novocaine. It may take a little bit of time to let it kind of soak in. And it may be 3-0 midway through the second quarter and people are getting frustrated. But the way the game works is you keep putting the pressure on them. They make a mistake. You pounce. Do it again. And then when Iowa gets ahead in the 3rd quarter and they're feeling pressed, that's when the defense just completely shuts the door, steals the ball, probably has a pick 6. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's 31-10. That's kind of the game. If Iowa plays its game, that's how they'll end up.
Yeah, and it's, Iowa's 5.5, 6 point favorite, somewhere in there. So, that gives you an idea, because Iowa was a 2.5 point favorite, I think, last week at home against Washington. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the odds makers think about it. And I looked at, Scott, can Iowa run the ball on Michigan State? Ohio State ran for 185, 5.3 a carry. Oregon ran for 213, 5.8 a carry. Yeah. So chances are, even though Michigan State knows Iowa's going to run the ball, Iowa should still be able to run the ball.
Yeah. I mean, they've been pretty good for the most part. They've competed, let's say. I think they have a really good coach. I really like Jonathan Smith. I think he's going to build a good program. But you look 2 sides of the portal here, Michigan State and Indiana. Indiana had a schedule that, everything Iowa got told about Iowa in 2015 or the Big Ten West, it's nothing compared to what Indiana has faced. That's why they're 6-0, and we'll see this week if that's a legit 6-0 or it's inflated. Michigan State had the complete opposite. The Big Ten kind of hurt them because they gave them, in 6 days they played Ohio State at home. Then they had to fly out to Oregon on a Friday. You got 2 top 5 teams. And then, oh, by the way, your next 2 games are against the 2 teams that battled for the Big Ten championship last year. Now one's a huge rivalry game and Iowa's in there too. And I don't like these matchups for Michigan State. They're a team that's, they did have a bye, so they're going to be a little fresher. They're going to be excited. It's at home. It's at night. And I think they're building the program the right way. It's just you don't want to play a team like this. You want to play a team like Nebraska. And this is no offense to Nebraska. I think they're pretty good, but they're a little more inconsistent. Iowa knows what it is. Iowa can execute the game plan and wants to execute. Nebraska is still trying to kind of figure out what it is and how consistent can it be on offense and everything. And I think you can create some issues, young quarterback, whereas with Iowa, Cade McNamara had his best day as a quarterback at Spartan Stadium a million years ago. So 3 years ago.
He got hurt against them last year, right? Was that the game he got hurt, Michigan State?
Yeah,
I thought that was.
ACL, yeah.
So I'm sure hopefully they can keep them upright on Saturday. Yeah. And as we talked about, Bo Stevens being hurt, we talked about this going into the season, that Iowa had some experienced depth on the offensive line, and this was a possibility, and here we are.
Yeah. Tyler Ellsbury stepped in and I thought played really well. And, and you could make a case that if of the depth at those positions, maybe Ellsbury is the best one, but maybe they also looked at it and thought, you know what, Bo Stevens is a junior and we need to stagger that a little bit more. And Ellsbury is kind of your super backup interior, and DeYoung, who had started a lot of games at guard, is not, in there and has played only a little bit on the edge, and which is kind of wild. But overall, I thought he stepped in and played well. And if something else happens, they still have a little bit more depth, and that's a luxury Iowa hasn't had for really a long time. because you even think back, Rob, to like the 18 season where they had the tight ends that were great. Their guards weren't very good. The 19 season, that's when Elric Jackson got hurt and they were shuffling everybody around and it wasn't really working right. This line's probably the most consistent it's been since maybe 16. Maybe it's not as dynamic as Wirfs and Jackson and Linderbaum, but consistently, together, they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think had some obviously some breakdowns against Ohio State, but a lot of teams are going to have that, and if they can, because I asked Kate about this on Tuesday. I don't think I asked the question right. I was trying to ask him like how he feels like from a movement standpoint. Can he move? Because I feel like he's going to have some opportunities to run here, I think, just based on how teams are going to counter what Iowa's done to this point. I think he's going to get some one-on-one stuff throwing, and I think he's going to have some ability to run. And I just wonder how healthy he is to take advantage of that. I noticed last week they brought Sullivan in above they're about the 30-yard line or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
So I'm just wondering kind of what that dynamic is there, if he's going to be able to do damage with his legs, if he's given that opportunity, and how much more, if they do incorporate more Sullivan, how they do that.
I don't know. I don't know what the next step is there, Rob. That is really kind of fascinating.
We've not seen this before, so that's why it's kind of intriguing to me.
I think his little fumble situation and near the goal line that almost became very costly. I know a lot of fans immediately went, we don't want this at all, and shut him down. And so if nothing else, that how it works over at Fortress Kinnick, then they said, okay, he's our guy. The fans are mad, so therefore we must stick with him. But I don't know. I mean, I think that just adds another element if they're willing to use it, and that's. I've always thought that, the next phase of zone read, if you use it, is, RPO. And he's capable of running RPO. And that's something that they should use and probably should use outside of the red zone. Like they're at the midfield-ish. And it's like, hey, we've got Caleb Johnson. That means everybody's got to you got to watch all 11 players. And if he's capable of taking off running, then do it. The other facet to me, I want to see more of in the passing game is a little bit is more big play opportunities in the passing game. Can you stretch the field? And how much can Cade throw it? He didn't do so well in a couple of the opportunities he's had this year in that department. But if there's going to be chances against probably a team that's, Joe Rossi's a great defensive coordinator for them. He was great at Minnesota. He's a fantastic defensive coordinator. So he'll try to keep them as disciplined as possible, but they're not quite there yet. Yeah. So the opportunity is there's going to be some safeties and second level players crashing down on Caleb Johnson, and that's going to open up the deep ball. Can they hit it? Can Cade get it to them? They had one outstanding pass that was stretched into a big play with Dayton Howard, and I think there are going to be more opportunities this week and probably into the future.
Yeah, no doubt. As teams become more and more focused on Caleb Johnson, I don't know why they haven't been more focused on him to this point, but he's not easy to stop, even though he's coming your way. It's the closest thing that I've seen around here to Sean Green since it's Sean Green. There's just you see these guys that are special, and it's fun to watch. Because if you've done this for a while, you know that this doesn't happen.
Yeah,
where it's rare. So enjoy it while it lasts. And he's just kid is a specimen.
Yeah. I mean, he's our he and Ashton Genty are our first two running backs, first team All-American running backs. That's incredible. We've seen him since day one. I remember his 200-yard day against Purdue a couple years ago, and you're like, okay, this guy's got something. But it just start. He got hurt a little bit last year. LaShawn was a little bit more consistent. Yeah. And, so you just there. Remember, I think it was Northwestern game. He didn't even get on the field, and you're just wondering what's going to happen here. What's the end game? And then he's suspended for the opener this year, and I thought, or at least the first half, and I'm like, oh boy. Well, that's why Kamari Moulton's starting, and kind of trying to rationalize why he might be the better player. And then we saw really quickly with this mid-zone run and the offensive line development, they've got something really good there with him, and enjoy it while it lasts. Because I mean, if Iowa can get to the Big Ten championship game or the playoff, I'm sure he'll be there. Otherwise, maybe the Nebraska game is probably sayonara. I mean, just to be on the smart side here, I wouldn't go play in the Duke's Mayo Bowl or anything.
No offense, Trip.
Yeah. Not Caleb Johnson. I mean, enjoy him, and then enjoy when you see him get drafted in the, second round next year.
Yeah, he's a special player, and it'll be fun to watch him. I hope he gets to 2000. That would be cool.
Larry Johnson to me, man.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. He is a fun guy to watch, rare guy to watch. I was going to say let's pick this game, but let's wait and go through our picks now, and we'll get to this one at the end.
Okay. So you ready for picks?
Yeah, let's do picks. Anything else you wanted to hit on?
Oh, no, this is good. So let's see here. Last week we were both 4-3. So winning weeks. We're both wrong on different games. I was wrong when I picked Illinois. They were minus 19. And at halftime it was 24-3, and I felt pretty good about that. Not so much. Then you picked Rutgers minus 2.5. You probably feel worse than I do.
Yeah, that one was. I'm glad I didn't use my real money on that.
Yeah. Minnesota was minus 5 that we lost. They won by 4. So that was painful. We both picked Ohio State minus 3. So no matter what would have happened at the end, it didn't matter for us. But we were both good on Northwestern, on Iowa. You were good on Purdue. I was good on Wisconsin. And then we both took USC plus 5. So both 4-3. So we had a good week there. And we'll start with the first game that I'll be at, which is Oregon at Purdue. And Purdue is 27.5 dog at home against the number 2 team in the country. Rob,
I'm taking the points.
You're taking the points. I am too. And here's why. Oregon's playing on a short week after a major win. They're playing at the worst team in the Big Ten. They know it, and it's got that capability for playing poorly.
Just human nature of trying to get up again after you just beat Ohio State, and like you said, you're playing the worst team in the league.
They should, in most weeks, if you're removing the college factor and you're just plugging in the NFL factor. Oh my God, this would, you go out and you do your job and you beat the hell out of them, but they're kids. They think differently. Yep. And, now everybody loves them. And we're fine. They're terrible. They don't even have an offensive coordinator. And, and then, of course, Dan Lanning's going, did you watch the second half against Illinois? We don't have to worry about that. That was Illinois. We're better than they are. If they were playing Illinois, I might be a little bit more nervous, but I still think this is the trap. Wisconsin, minus 7 at Northwestern's lacrosse field. I'm going to go with the Badgers again. I think they're playing pretty well. I mean, they won 42-7 last week.
Yeah, I watched them, and they seem like they may be figuring it out. I'm not there completely yet, but it seems like they may be getting somewhere with this offense, but we'll see. As the season goes on, but I will take Wisconsin as well. I'm starting to come over to the Badgers side.
Northwestern played really well last week in blasting Maryland 37-10. I mean, it was not. It was one of those. It reminded me so much of the Iowa game at Maryland in 21, where it was just like turnover, and Iowa was just rolling them, and that's kind of what it felt like last week. And I'm just like, and Northwestern usually plays Wisconsin close in Evanston, but I don't know. I think I think this could be like a 10-point win for the Badgers, like 30-20 type of thing. UCLA, which I have changed their nickname to UCLA until they prove it, until they win a game in the Big Ten. UCLA at Rutgers, -4.5 for the Scarlet Knights.
God, that seems extremely low. Give me Rutgers.
Okay. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take UCLA. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think they played a lot better last week than Rutgers did. And they're going to win a game somewhere. They're not good. They're not going to beat an Iowa or anybody like that or USC, but this is a spot where even though they're going all the way across the coast and it's an early game, it's got every reason, and they're saying, but it's homecoming for Rutgers, but there's just something there that's making me go.
Yeah, that's one of those lines like you saw when you heard when you presented that line to me. I'm like, God, that seems low.
Mm-hmm.
So the old gambler in me is like, stay away from that. That line's too easy. So, I see your point on this, no doubt.
The game I'm going to be at, Nebraska at Indiana. Fascinating game in so many areas. You've got Nebraska it's 6.5 for the Hoosiers at home. Are they for real? They've got a coach who thinks he's for real. They've got the Huskers think they're for real, and we're not sure if either one is. I'm going to take Nebraska. I'm not saying they're going to win, but I think that they've got a chance to give me the 6.5.
Yeah, I think these teams are closer than that. I know people are high on the Hoosiers right now, and rightfully so. They're playing well, but I think this is probably a field goal game one way or the other, so I'll take the points.
Okay. USC goes all the way across the mighty continent and plays at Maryland, and USC -7. I'm going to take USC in this one. They lost a close game to Penn State. This is a long flight. They've got an afternoon game, so their body clock will be a little bit better. Maryland, what the hell?
I don't understand Maryland. It's just like the most unstable, schizophrenic program. I mean, it's like one week you're like, they got it going now. And then boom, that egg last week was like, Jesus, where did that come from? Right.
I know. I can't figure them out. And if they would have played well, then you look at this game and going, okay, USC, is going all the way across the country. Maryland has talent. They do. Ty Felton's a really good receiver, but they've always had talent. That's never been their issue. They're kind of like Illinois in that, where talent's great. Michigan State too, to some extent. Talent's great, but you don't do it the right way. And they've been to 3 straight bowl games. I'm not sure they're going to get there this year. So I took USC.
I'm going to take, after all that, I'm taking the points.
Okay, go for it.
I think USC may win a close one, but I think Maryland, the Jekyll and Hyde Maryland is going to change again and play well on Saturday. I'm going with that because I have no actual feel for it at all.
Yeah, this is
throwing darts when it comes to Maryland.
Yeah. A game that I wrote about today with Red Grange. Tomorrow, Friday, is his the 100th anniversary of his performance, which is the greatest in college football history, against Michigan. He had compiled 402 all-purpose yards and 6 touchdowns back in an era where most games were won 6-0, 14-7, something to that effect. He scored 4 touchdowns in the first 12 minutes. He touched the ball 8 times and had almost 300 yards. That doesn't have anything to do with the game on Saturday, but the same 2 teams are playing in Champaign. I think that shows the strength of the Big Ten Conference, that you can have 2 franchises, that can compete like this. And they're both ranked. Michigan -3 at Illinois. I like Illinois in this one. I think they're a more complete team. It's going to be close, very competitive, maybe even high scoring to some extent. But I think at home in Champaign, with all the festivities going on, I'm not thinking with my head as much as other areas, but I really like the mighty Illini.
Yeah, I'm going to take Illinois too. I'm just going to chalk last week's second half against Purdue up to them just letting up and just kind of taken for granted that they were going to cruise, and Purdue showed some life. Hopefully, Illinois learned a lesson from that, and I don't think full 60-minute effort will be a problem this week. And I watching Michigan against Washington a few weeks ago. It's not close to the same team it was the last few years. So it feels weird picking Illinois to beat Michigan, but I will do so.
Yeah, I know. And I feel the same way. And, and you talk about another coincidence, in 1923, both of those teams tied for the national championship. They didn't play each other. So Michigan was coming off being a defending champion. And this year, they not lost 20 straight games. They were 18-0-2 at that point. And then Michigan this year coming off being a defending champion. So you've got all the, I don't know. I get into history and the history of football, especially. And I think this is just something that was tremendous. But finally, the game that, well, I guess you're probably not going either, are you?
No.
Here. So neither of us will be at, but the team we largely cover, Iowa -6 at Michigan State. Give me the Hawkeyes. I think this could be a big one.
Yeah, I'll take Iowa as well. I think I picked like 27-10 or something like that in my preview. I think it's a couple touchdowns at least for Iowa, and at minimum they win by a touchdown, which would cover the 6 points.
I'm there with you, Rob. I think this is a game where the Twitter sphere will be all up in arms when it's 3-0 in the second quarter, and what's going on? Get him out of there! Fire Ferentz! And then all of a sudden it's like bing, 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 bing. And next thing you know, it's a blowout. And why can't we come out and play two halves? And just all the greatest hits will be coming out. But I think Iowa wins decisively.
I don't always have a handle on this, but we've covered this team for a long time, and I think you can kind of recognize tendencies or a development of a team and kind of where this feels like an Iowa team that has a chance to be really, really good in the second half of this season. We talked about the discipline. 1.8 penalties per game is insane.
Mm-hmm.
The turnovers against Ohio State, you can't wish them away. They happened. But I think that was more of an aberration. And they've also gotten better at taking away. Last year, struggled with that. Back on taking away. Aaron Graves, who I think just gets overlooked for some reason because he's a defensive tackle. He's a kid that is going to make himself a lot of money. It may not be next year, but I think we're seeing the breakout with him, Scott.
That was an incredible week. He had a great first game, but then you look at it and go, well, that's Illinois State.
Yeah.
The last week was like, okay, he came to play and he played well. And Michigan State's weak point is his offensive line. It's just not good. Yeah. And it's patchwork, and it's what happens in a portal era. And that I think that he and Y.A. Black have a chance to really cause some damage. And Y.A. is as good as any player at his position in the country. It's just, he's not going to generate a lot of stats, and he'll get paid in the NFL draft, and he'll get paid big time. If he's healthy, when it's time for his second contract, because I think he's a lot like Jaleel and a lot like Carl Davis, and Carl Davis just got signed the other day, and Jaleel should be signed. He's worked out for teams, and I think YA is probably better than both of them, and so bigger. Yeah. That's possible, but this team, they have the second easiest schedule of any team that has 1 or 2 losses in the country at 19-17. Rutgers is 19-18, so that's the only one easier, and I'm not sure that Rutgers could hold a lot of things.
How much do you think style points will play into this, Scott, with these games, being as Iowa's going to be favored in most of them? I'm wondering if they can impress the committee with some style points by winning these games dominantly. Caleb Johnson continuing to do what he's doing. Those are all things that I think boost the resume.
Sure. It really right now it's kind of about building the mosaic of your season, and then getting to November 5th. As far as if we have November 5th for everything going on.
What else is going on? The college football playoff first rankings come out November 5th. I don't know. I'll have to check and see what else is going on that day.
Yeah, there's a few things. Turn on the TV on, change around a little bit, but like the next 3 weeks, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin. Obviously, you have to win, but you do it in a way that generates people talking about you, that you look good, that when they're viewing the film, it's like, this is clearly the best team on the field. They're playing better.
Like last week.
Yeah. In like 2020, they were that way.
Yeah.
And then they come the first rankings, and if they win those 3 games, I think they'll be around 20, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Then you go to UCLA on a Friday night, and it'll be on Fox. The whole world will see it. That's when you lay the smack down. That's when you beat the shit out of them, and that means that, you're in your 4-minute offense. You try to score. If it's 37-0, you make it 44-0. You make sure everybody sees that, because you're off the following week. So if you can build that template, which would put them at a 5-game winning streak, going into that bye week on the 16th of November, you've put yourself in that position to where you're in the mid-teens. You're on the cusp. You've got 2 games left. You don't know what's going around you. You go and you play your son's team, Maryland. Take care of business there, and then you've got Nebraska to finish. So I like the trajectory of this team a lot. If they stay healthy, I think this team is capable of getting to at least 9 wins, at least.
Yeah, because, we know that when things go well around here, this is kind of I wouldn't say the starting point, but from here up, it gets better. It just keeps everything, little things that may be going wrong start to come together. They parlay what they've been able to do in the running game to open up, as Scott said, some deep balls in the passing game. Now you got defenses that are worrying about the deep ball and Caleb Johnson. There's just potential here for this to be a really good football team if things come together. And like Scott said, the trajectory right now is exciting if you're an Iowa fan. I think it's something to get excited about. I think the one thing I worry about is if they slip up one more time, don't get into that college football playoff, that this team won't be looked at the same. And I get it. That's where the bar's set. But this is an enjoyable team to watch, because Scott and I are old and we like to see teams that can run the football really well when other teams know they're going to do it and they smash them in the mouth.
You got to appreciate that. And yes, there's always going to be frustration if they don't reach where you want them to be. And if this team goes 10-2 and it's the first team out, it's the first team out. Now, I know I've said kind of playoff or bust, and I'll stand behind that. I think that's what you aspire to be,
especially with the guys they had back.
Yeah, and so, but if they have a playoff record, they just don't get in the playoff. That's different than going 8-4.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, and it's you can't just let the Iowa State loss just eat you alive and say, well, this team sucks because they lost to Iowa State. Well, Iowa State, that's why you want Iowa State to keep winning. They're 6-0. They're in the top 10. And so it is kind of baffling when you think about the rankings, that a team that won by 1 point on a 54-yard field goal is ranked in the top 10, and the other team is barely receiving votes. There's not that much separation between those two teams, but that's the way the rankings work, and everybody,
we talked about it earlier, how the rankings come together, and I'm not sure that it's thorough.
No, people work hard at it, so I'll give them credit because it's not, they spend time, but it's not. It's
not those rankings they had. I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have rankings. I remember when Hayden was voting on when he was still alive. It was like
the Harris poll or whatever.
Yeah, it was a bunch of Don James was on it. It was a bunch of old coaches, and they watched games on Saturdays. I think I'd be interested in having like a bunch of retired coaches that watch football all Saturdays do a poll.
I'd like to have a bunch of old coaches sit around and do like a Manning cast for football, for college
That would be
football.
good.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So like Hayden when he was alive. I wouldn't want somebody who's just coach speak, but
yeah, somebody with some color and character
yeah,
like Hayden.
yeah, that would be kind of funny. But to your point, Rob, about teams getting better since since that Nate Stanley collision at the goal line at Wisconsin in 19, they are 18-1 in November.
Wow.
The only loss was Nebraska after Cooper DeJean gets knocked out and they put a true freshman to try to cover the fastest receiver in the country, and then you have Spencer Petras getting knocked out, and I think that showed everybody, it certainly showed me, that it was like, well, maybe they do know what they're doing at quarterback. It doesn't mean that they're good, it just means that they're right. But to have an 18-1 record, and you look at it just that shows you growth and the way that team gets better, each and every year, and they've got a schedule to do it again. So that's why if they get to the end of the road, they're 10-2, the numbers just don't work out. There are 3 Big Ten teams that get to the playoff, and it's Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State, and they're 4 in the SEC. They didn't get screwed, but celebrate the season for what it is, because we've seen some good seasons too not end up in the promised land. 1991 to me is at the very top of the list. They were 10-1, and they go to the Holiday Bowl because of the Big Ten's arrangement instead of the Orange Bowl or wherever they could have and should have. And we've seen other teams kind of hit that peak too, when they deserve to be at a higher bowl.
I think this was in the notes this week as well. Iowa 14-5 on the road since 2020, which is really impressive.
Right. That's why it frustrates me, Rob, when we get a lot of Twitter feedback if they lose or struggle at certain times, and it's like, fire everybody, this sucks, we got to start over. And do you know what you have? I understand you can be frustrated with some of the parts of the game, but if winning is the objective and your team wins, then what is the problem here? Why is there a part of this base so angry about style points? And if they could just temper it a little bit, they might actually enjoy it. But I fear that no matter what we say or do, it's not going to matter.
No, expectations and are really subjective, and I get it, and I think you and I are on the same page coming into this season. The measuring stick was going to be a veteran team like this making the CFP, but you also have to understand how hard it is to make it with only 12. I know it's 12 teams and it's 3 times what it's been, but it's still really hard, and you're dealing with the SEC too, which is when you're trying to compare yourself with them as the Big Ten, it's going to be tough when you get beyond those top 3 teams, at least what the setup is now.
Yeah. And how would you feel if you're in the Big 12 and you're going, what if Iowa State goes 11-1 in the regular season, then they get to the championship game and lose?
Yep.
And I know I've had this discussion about, well, how did that work out with Iowa? If Iowa's 10-2 and Iowa State's 11-2, it's not an automatic binary choice. It's not just, well, Iowa State won, so Iowa State. In that period of time, Iowa will have won, 7 straight games, 6 straight games, something like that. And then
with the potential of it being a ranked win at the end against Nebraska.
Right, and possibly Wisconsin, and looking better and better and getting better as the season progresses. Whereas you're looking at Iowa State, let's say they lose it at Utah and then lose to BYU in the championship game. That's 2 out of your last 3 games you lost. You won on a 54-yard field goal. Iowa State absolutely 100% deserves the ranking they've got, and they would totally deserve to be in there if they're 12-1 at least. But when you start adding it up, it's not just, well, Iowa State won, so therefore they're going in. There's there's a lot more into it, and that may be frustrating to people, and they won't. That would that would really chap some ass if Iowa was like the last at-large team in, if at 10-2 and Iowa State was left out.
That would be fun. I would like to see that because I like that. I liked it. I'm as long as I'm not involved directly in the anarchy, I'm all for it.
In football, absolutely, Rob.
Yeah, life, not so much.
Yeah.
All right. Let's call it a day. How about that? It's 10:30. I'm tired. Got some yard work to do today. Got to clean it up before. Now I'm freaked out, like, because we were talking about the cold at the top of the podcast. I'm like, all right, is the really bad stuff coming in here? I need to clear and get all the crap out of my yard.
Yeah. I've got a lot of stuff I've just been waiting to, like, I have a lot of twigs and that I just don't want to burn, but I've spent like months now going, I don't know. But I haven't had to worry about mowing for a while.
Yeah.
It's been nice, but it should, we've still got a couple nice weeks of weather coming up too. So if you want to procrastinate, today's a good day to do that.
Okay, I'll do that. It's not hard to get me to procrastinate. It's really a natural trait of mine. So there you go. All right, folks. All right, folks. Enjoy the football this weekend, particularly the Iowa at Michigan State game. Again, 6:30 Central Time. NBC Saturday night. Check that out. And check out The Athletic for Scott's coverage of the other Big Ten games he'll be at this weekend and a lot more. The Athletic's a good bargain and a good investment if you're looking for I haven't read the Mets-Dodgers story from last night. I don't know if I'll get to that today because I did not enjoy the outcome.
If I were you, I would just wait and watch the game today.
I'm going to watch the game today. That's what I'll do. I'll take Scott's advice there. And I'll procrastinate on the yard work. So I'm not getting anything done today.
Yeah. You know what? when we're like this, it'll take care of itself at some point, right?
Yes. All right, folks. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thank you so much to our sponsors for helping to support the show. Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. We'll preview the Northwestern game, recap the Michigan State game, and have other stuff to talk about and just ramble on like we do on this podcast. So come back and join us, won't you? Until then, be well. Peace.
Goodbye, Scott.
You got it in. I forgot.